Welcome to the very first season of the very first episode of Spilling Beans. I'm your host, the Gossip Keeper, and here's the deal. This is not your average history podcast. This is where we peel back the velvet curtains of the past to reveal scandals, secrets, power moves, and downright juicy drama that change perspectives in today's generation. And speaking of drama, for our debut series, we're diving into one of the most scandalous dynasties of all time. Any guesses? I mean, you guys might know about this era because this particular era has been going on for ages now and it's so viral. It's still viral and I'm thinking it'll forever be viral. Let me tell you what it is. It's called the Tudors. Yes, you heard that right. Henry VI and his six wives and all the heartbreak, betrayal and give even the wildest soap opera a run for its money. But before we gossip about the queens themselves, we need to set the stage. Who was Henry VIII? Why is he still one of the most famous and infamous kings in history? Why centuries later do we keep coming back to his story as if it's the latest binge-worthy Netflix series? So let's start spilling. So picture this. England in the early 1500s. My lord, that's so far way back. The smell of wood smoke in the air, cobble streets buzzing with gossip, noblemen strutting in furs, and peasants working the land. Castles and palaces stood as symbols of wealth and danger. Power wasn't just inherited, it was contested, bargained, and sometimes stolen. And right in the middle of it all, Henry VIII, a king who could light up a room with his charm, but also terrify you with a single glare. Have you ever met someone whose personality just takes you over everything? I mean, you might have not, but this was Henry. He was tall, athletic, skilled, jousting and hunting, loved music and poetry, and people admired him at least in the beginning, of course. But there was another side to him. If you crossed him, if you disappointed him, or worse, if you stood in his way, your head could very well end up on a spike. I mean, I wouldn't want to stand in his way at this point. Henry became king in 1509 at just 17 years old. How young is that? When I was 17, I remember rather than studying, I was catching back on Tom and Jerry and Barbie series. Well, King Henry was young, ambitious, and already determined to make his mark. He loved to get what he wanted, and what he wanted more often than not involve women loyalty and power. So, here's the big question for you guys out there. What happens when your heart, your crown, and your ego are constantly battling for the first place? This actually reminds me of the drama of my sports meet when I was in school. But yet again, this is like Henry's story. And soon it's going to become the story of the six women who would share his throne and sometimes his downfall. Of course, Henry VIII isn't just remembered for being king, he's remembered for being the man of six wives. If I were to tell this to one of my friends nowadays, they'll be like, six wives? How did he manage even one? I mean, in the end of the day, the generation now makes a little bit more sense than the generation before. And yes, you probably know the rhyme for this Tudor era. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, and survived. So there was a particular band that actually made this go very viral. So I think you guys can even search it up on TikTok and it'll come up right away. But that rhyme barely scratches the surface. Each queen had her own story, her personality, her own strategy for survival in a marriage that was less about romance and more about politics, heirs, and survival. Catherine of Aragon, the first queen to be with Henry, the Spanish princess who stood her ground even when Henry demanded she step aside. Anne Boleyn, ambitious, magnetic, and ultimately tragic, the woman who brought down a queen and then became one. Honestly, she's my favorite from all the six. Jane Seymour, the quiet, seemingly gentle wife who gave Henry his longed for son, but paid the ultimate price. Anne of Cleves, dismissed as unattractive by Henry, yet clever enough to outmaneuver him and walk away with wealth and freedom. Catherine Howard, young, reckless, and caught in a dangerous game of desire and betrayal. To be honest, from all the information I read, Catherine Howard was pretty young. And when I say pretty young, I cannot exaggerate it enough. Last but not the least, Catherine Parr, the last wife who survived Henry, outlived him, and became the caretaker of his legacy. Now, another question. If you were in their shoes, would you dare to defy Henry? Or would you play the game carefully, bending just enough to survive? That's the kind of impossible choice these women faced every single day. Alright, from all of this, let's not forget though, Henry himself is at the center of all this chaos. He wasn't just a king, he was the king who redefined what it meant to rule. He broke England away from the Catholic Church, a move that changed religion forever. He executed nobles, advisors, and even close friends when they stopped being useful. He built up England's navy dressed in the most extravagant fashions and demanded absolute loyalty. Here's a secret though. Henry most favored linen clothing, and it was mostly made by a very specific woman who is mysterious until today. So even the modern generation wouldn't know who she was. Pretty secret, huh? But Henry wasn't just a monster, he was a man. Deeply insecure about his legacy, obsessed with producing a male heir, desperate to be remembered as a glorious king. Well, I mean, he may wanted that, but it doesn't sound good in my thoughts at this point. He loved music and composed songs. He was a sportsman. He charmed people when he wanted to. Yet his temper and paranoia made him dangerous. Imagine how intelligent he was. But yet people define him as a very disgusting man today. Well, I couldn't agree more. Here's the thing, the wives weren't just side characters in the story. They shaped his reign. They pushed him, angered him, inspired him, and sometimes outlived him. Their stories are just as important as his because together they shaped England's destiny. So there you have it, the opening act of Henry VIII saga. A king with charm, ruthlessness, and an obsession that would rewrite history. Over the next episodes, we'll dive deep into each queen's story, uncovering not just who they were, but how they survived, resisted, and in some cases fell victim to the most powerful man in England. And next week, we are starting with Catherine of Aragon, a woman of incredible strength, dignity, and stubbornness. The wife who refused to back down, even when her refusal risked everything. Trust me, her story is fiery, heartbreaking, and unforgettable. And unforgettable it is. So this wraps up the very first episode of Spilling Beans. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow us on Instagram at Spilling Beans to stay updated on all our posts, dates, and times. The next episode will be streaming next week on Twitch at twitch.tv/spillingbeans. So make sure to tune in. A special shout out and thank you to our two amazing viewers who engaged with me during the stream, John Collin 2005 and Wolfboy69. You made this debut even more special today. Until next time, I'm the Gossip Keeper and this was Spilling Beans.